Man, I don't know about you. If I wasn't ready to share the word, I am now. That worship was awesome. It's too bad to cut it off, but we got to get into the word. How y'all doing today? Good. You weren't ready. It was my fault. Okay, now you're ready. How y'all doing today? All right, amen. Amen, amen. Hey, happy Easter. That feels so good to say, by the way, that happy Easter, Jesus is alive, because this is our first Easter ever, which is really, really exciting. If you are new to Captivate, welcome, because so are we. We are 7 months old. How long can you say you're new? Is it 7 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? I don't know, but we're going to find out together. But this is our first Easter, and I love that because Easter is one of my favorite days of the year. How many people know that on Easter you should be able to eat as much chocolate as you want and it not go to your hips? Has anybody got faith today? Come on, God can do miracles. Amen. But I love everything that comes with Easter. I love the candy, the Easter eggs, the food, the fellowship, the hangout, the barbecue. I love all that stuff, but how many know that's not really what Easter's all about? Easter's not really about any of those things. Easter is actually the most important day in human history. It is the foundation of everything that we believe. If Jesus doesn't raise from the dead, we don't need to be here. But he did. And the thing about Easter, it's such a mystery. That there's over 1 billion people across the globe on this weekend that are going to celebrate a Jewish carpenter who only went public for about 3 years. And in those 3 years, most people hated him and didn't want anything to do with him. And now, over a fourth of the globe claims to give their life to follow him. If only he could see it now, Oh, that's right, he can, because he's alive. And he's here and he's with us. It wasn't over at the cross. And it wasn't over at the cross because of what Jesus declares in Revelation chapter 1 in verse 17. I thought it'd be appropriate today to start off Easter with a quote from Jesus. Is that okay with you? Okay, either way, here's what the Bible says in Revelation chapter 1 in verse 17. Jesus says, "Don't be afraid. I am the first and the last. I'm the living one. I died, but I'm back. I'm back, and I'm alive forever and ever." And here's my favorite part. He says, "I hold the keys of death and the grave." Is that good news? Oh, man, is that good news? Listen. If you're only going to amen one thing today, that was it. You missed your cue. He holds the keys to death and the grave. That's an exciting thing. Like on Easter, we celebrate a lot of things. But we would be remiss today if we did not celebrate the power of Jesus. More than any other event in history, Easter accentuates, shows, sheds light on Jesus' power. In fact, before I go any further, we have a story on a video that we want to share with you that really, I think, shows well this power. Check this out.
About 14 years ago, I moved to San Diego because my parents got divorced. For a long time, I was distant from God, and then I just, after the divorce, decided altogether I was done because I was so confused. Like, why would this happen to me? Why is my family broken? And why do we have to go through these things? Because of that situation, I became very depressed and became very angry with people, with God, with everything, really. And a friend of mine had told me that he had a gun. Then I decided to take it home with me because I had every intention of ending my life. I had the gun and I put it and I loaded it, and when push came to shove, the gun wouldn't fire. And when I pulled the trigger at first, it really freaked me out, man. So I put it back in my backpack and I was like, I can't do this. If it didn't fire, I'm not going to give it another shot. So I put it back in my backpack, I left. And, for the time after that, I was still so depressed. I just didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know who I was. And none of that really changed until about 9 months ago when I met my fiance, Deborah. What attracted me the most to Debbie was that she had this overwhelming joy in everything that she did. Was so confused. I was like, why? How could somebody be that way in a world like this? So one day I decided to ask her, and she told me that the reason she's like that is because God is in her life, and that she knows that no matter how bad things get, God is always going to be there, and there's always an answer, and there's always a reason. I came to a breaking point. And that was this night that I had a complete panic attack. It was a breakdown. I was having a really bad day at work. Turned out to be a really bad week. A lot of things were going wrong. and I just broke down. I was crying. I couldn't breathe. I was in so much pain and had so much anger that I thought that was it. I remember Debbie, she came over to me and she started praying, listening to her and the things that she was saying. And then I felt this warm feeling, this warmth come over me. I can't explain it as anything else other than somebody hugging me from behind. And right before I blacked out, I just remember that warm feeling in my chest. And I woke up and she was still praying for me. She was there and she never left. And in the moment that I woke up, I expected to be angry. I expected to have pain, but I didn't. I felt at peace. I felt warm still. And I felt like everything was going to be okay. That's what turned it around for me, because if it weren't for that moment where I was lost and God showed me a light, if it wasn't for that moment, I don't know where I'd be now. Since God has found me and since I have turned to God, and my life has been so different. I've had this overwhelming desire to help people, to make changes in my own life in a positive light, as well as to positively impact the people around me. I feel so much more worth because of God and because of everything that's happened.
Is that cool, man? I'm so proud that we get to be part of that. That dude is in our church family. It's in our church family. It makes me want to read that verse again. Talk about the power of God. Jesus holds the keys to death and the grave. Yeah, he does. Amen. He's power. He gets to decide what lives and what does not live in our life. If he wants to end the addiction in your life, the loneliness, the pain, he absolutely can. And he could bring new life. I think on Easter, we need to see this power that Jesus has. We need to see it because often we hold a very weak view of Jesus. We don't see him as somebody who has all this power. And with that, I'll ask you kind of a funny question, but is there anybody in here today you think that you could take me? Like, you just look at me and you're like, I could beat that guy up. Anybody? You just, come on. Okay, we got hands all over the place. Okay. That's a little more than I thought. The grandma in the back, that was too much. I don't know. If you say you can take me, that's okay. I'm okay. I'm not offended by that. That's not a problem if you underestimate my power. It's not a problem. But you know what is a problem? When we underestimate the power of Jesus. When we don't have a powerful view and look of who he is in our life. I mean, when you think of Jesus, what do you think about? What picture comes in your head? I think for many of us, it's this painting. It's this illustration that somebody drew at some point, and we saw it. Here's Jesus. He's got dirty blonde hair and pretty blue eyes like he's German or something. He wasn't. And he's standing there, and he's got a robe on and a staff in his hand, and he's got friends, and he's petting sheep, right? He's just petting sheep. And I think that we paint a view of Jesus like that because we want to show his tender side and his compassionate, merciful side. And is Jesus compassionate? Yes. Is he tenderhearted and merciful? Absolutely. He absolutely is. Did he pet sheep? We don't really know. It doesn't actually say that in the Bible. He was not a shepherd by trade. He was actually a carpenter. But you know what it does say in the Bible? You know what Jesus does talk about a lot is his power. Raising people from the dead, casting out demons, healing the sick. He goes into people's situation, and he doesn't just comfort them in their issue. He totally eliminates their issue. He's powerful. He's a powerful king. We don't always see him like that. Can I tell you today that Jesus is not just your friend, but he's a force to be reckoned with. Yeah. He's a power to be reckoned with, but we don't often see him like that. And when we have a weak view of Jesus, it makes us weak. It makes people who follow him weak. It does not give us the faith and the boldness to go outside of the church building, out in the city, and not just pray for people, but pray with them. To serve people, to expect God to do something only he can do. We forget that it's in our DNA. It is in your identity as a Christian, a Christian, to go into an impossible situation and watch it bow at the name Jesus. He's powerful. He's powerful. He's powerful. In fact, why don't we do this? Can we all take a deep breath today? On Easter, there's probably a lot getting here. Maybe you have some kids and there's planning. Let's just all take a deep breath on 3. Can we do that together? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. Breathe out. Feels pretty good, doesn't it? The only reason that you're able to take that breath is because Jesus allows it. And that's the God I'm talking about today. That's the God that I serve. It's a privilege to serve him. He's powerful. And yet I think the most powerful thing that he ever did was he chose to go to the cross, to die on it for us so we wouldn't have to. And by the way, I don't want us to misunderstand today. It's something he chose. He doesn't go to the cross because somebody overpowered him or beat him up, or forced him to do it. He chose to do it. He laid down his power willingly, and when he did, he turned his power into our hope. He gave it away. He laid something down so that what could be lifted up is life for us. He did that because he's powerful, but we forget this power. Why? Because life is hard. Life is hard. It's filled with ups and downs, right? It's filled with all kinds of loss and letdown, especially as we pray over people to God. We ask people who are sick for God to heal them, but sometimes that doesn't happen. We ask God to move through our life, bring a blessing, bring an encouragement. Sometimes we feel like that never comes. Sometimes we look up to leaders in our life, spiritual leaders, and they can let us down. Sometimes people hurt us. Every time these things happen, that faith, that belief in this power begins to fade. And all of a sudden, our surrounding becomes bigger than our spirit. And we're not really walking by faith anymore. We're walking by sight. Like maybe you've seen God move in some powerful ways, but maybe the time in between is long, You saw him move, and then it's like you're waiting for the next one. It's been a long time. And in the middle, that's hard to have faith. In the middle, sometimes it seems like the longer the middle is, the thinner my faith gets. And that's exactly where the disciples find themselves today in the story that we're going to read. The Easter story starts off with Jesus dying on the cross. In John chapter 19, that's known as Good Friday. But Easter is 3 days later. Jesus resurrects. We find that story in John chapter 20. And the story we're going to read about today is the first moment that Jesus appears to his disciples, his trusted followers, his boys, the guys that were like ready to celebrate him. They were getting ready to because he said he was coming back. They had the parade ready. The banner was kind of hung up. They had Jesus' favorite cake. The eggs were hidden. They were getting ready to celebrate him because he was on his way back, except the Bible doesn't say any of those things. They actually weren't doing any of those things. They weren't getting ready to celebrate him. They were actually hiding for their life. They did not actually believe that he was going to come back. They're in this place where they're struggling. They just saw Jesus do all these miracles and preach, and then he told them, this is going to happen, but I'm going to come back. But it only took about 3 days for them to lose that faith. You ever been there? God spoke to me. He provided. He did something. Sometimes we'll have a great Sunday. I feel like God will move in a great way. And all it takes sometimes is 2 hours for me to get home, and I forgot that. And I need him to move again. I need him to speak again. I need a brand new encouragement. And that's exactly where the disciples find themselves today. They're hiding, hoping that they don't die, hoping that nobody catches them. They thought that the people were going to do to them what they did to Jesus. And that's where we pick up the story, because they're about to get a big surprise on Easter. And so we're going to be in John chapter 20, verse 19. If you've got a Bible, you want to pull it out. If not, we're going to go ahead and throw it up on the screen. John chapter 20 and verse 19. Here's what the Bible says. It says, on the evening of the first day of the week, that's Easter Sunday, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them. How? I don't know. How did he get in there? The door's locked. It doesn't say he kicked the door in, but somehow he just appeared to them. Why? Because how many know there's not a locked door in the world that could keep Jesus outside of your situation? He's just going to go through it, man. He's going to find you however he needs to do it. And so Jesus, he's there, and he says, this peace be with you. After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they finally saw, wow, this is the Lord, and they believe. What's interesting to me is that what proved to them that Jesus was who he said he was not the miracles or the preaching or any of that. It was actually his scars. It was his scars. Yeah. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. We've been in the series, Heart for the One. We started it a few weeks ago. And really the premise of it is that sometimes in life we feel small, we feel insignificant, but the truth is Jesus would have come on Easter just to die for one person, just to die for you. He has a heart for the one. That's what the Bible teaches. We believe that Jesus is not in love with crowds, but individuals. And if individuals make up a crowd, so be it. But Jesus had this supernatural ability all through the gospel to weave through the crowd and find the one person who needed encouragement, who needed hope, and who needed healing. Whether it was the man on the mat in Mark chapter 2 that Jesus finds and heals in that packed out house, or it's the woman with the issue of blood in Mark chapter 5 who's crawling at the feet of the crowd. Jesus finds her. Or is the paralytic in John chapter 5 at the pool of Bethesda. Jesus heals him. He jumps up to thank Jesus, but there's so many people there, he can't even find him. Jesus did it then, and he does it today. Yeah. Doesn't matter how small you feel or how big the crowd is. Jesus weaves through. He finds the one who needs hope in healing, who's open, who's humble, and he brings it there. And in this story, obviously they all needed some encouragement. They were all doubting, but the Bible picks out one name, one disciple who perhaps needed it the most. We'll call him the one for today. His name is Thomas. That's what it says in skipping to verse 24. It says, now Thomas, Some of you have heard of this disciple known as Thomas. We know him as Doubting Thomas. Thank you. We know him as Doubting Thomas. It also says here that he was known as Didymus, right? If that was my name, I would change it too, right? If you're looking for baby names, don't look here. But anyway, Thomas is one of the 12, it says, but he wasn't there. He was not with the disciples when Jesus came. He didn't get to see that it was him. Verse 25, so the other disciples told him, hey, you missed it, but we've seen the Lord. But he said to them, please, unless I see the nail marks, unless I see the scars in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Verse 26, a week later. I didn't really notice that until this morning. You know, sometimes God will just let us sit and wrestle with this truth, whether or not we believe it. A week went by. He had to wrestle with this for 10 days. Sometimes it's a week later. It's a month later. It's a season later. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, but this time Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, didn't stop Jesus. Jesus came and stood among them, and he said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it on my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord, my God, essentially, it's you. I see you. Verse 29, last verse, then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Really excited today to preach our first ever Easter message. And really the message today is a surprise to me. 2 weeks ago we started this series. I talked about the older brother in Luke chapter 15. I told you that today I was going to talk about the younger brother, the prodigal son in Luke 15. I called that message. I wrote it. I liked it. It's good for Easter. I called it, Is This the Right Party? But as of a couple of days ago, of the time I spent with the Lord, he took me in a completely different direction. Anybody like a fresh word from the Lord? Anybody? Okay, a few. I only needed 3. I got it. Great. I hope that's what this is for you. Either way, I'm going to preach it, but I'm excited to preach this message on Easter that I've entitled, It Left a Scar. It left a scar. Anybody in here today, you like predicting things? You like predicting the way things are going to go, maybe your life. Maybe you're the person who talks during the movie, you know? You're like, it was her, I know it. And you just start calling it out. Maybe you like to predict what's going to happen in sports games. Anybody found an NCAA bracket? Where are those people at? Great. All the gamblers raise their hand. We'll pray for you later. Anyway, no big deal, but everybody's welcome to Captivate. But I love predicting things. I do. I love predicting what's going to happen. I'm actually the person who talks during the movie. That's why I said that. I'm yelling out stuff and talking, and I like to predict what's going to happen at the end of games, and I fill out a bracket every year. But I also like to predict trends and inventions and new companies, you know, that are going to work. And I love doing that, but I got to tell you today, I'm terrible at it. I'm like really bad. I need to give up. It's really not gone well. In fact, here's just a couple that I totally missed. How about Starbucks, okay? I remember when Starbucks was coming out, I thought, man, this is never going to work, okay? I don't like coffee. I don't drink it to this day. I've never drank it. It's gross. Tastes like dirt, right? My grandma drinks coffee. It's not very cool, right? And so Starbucks said, we're going to put a coffee shop on every corner. I'm like, please, that'll never catch, you know? How's that going? Yeah, they're all over the place. How about social media? I remember when social media came out, I'm like, it's never going to work. No one's going to want to do. Who wants to be on their phone all day? You know, like that's never going to work. Twittergram, that was a weird name. You know, no one's going to like that. Like, come on, we have Jesus. Do we really need hundreds of people affirming us so we can have a self-esteem? You know, like, that's what I thought. But, you know, I guess we kind of do need that. And so, and to this day, I've never had social media. And y'all ask me about it every other day of my life. And I like talking about it, but I just haven't gotten the memo yet. And so I missed out on that one. How about Google? I remember when Google was coming out, I told people, do not invest in Google, okay? It's a weird name. Is that a child's play toy? Google is weird. It's too easy to use. This is what I said. I said, hey, don't invest in that one. Invest in this one. Yeah, this other one. This other one's going to blow up. It's going to be great. It's really fun to use. It's called Ask Jeeves. Anybody remember Ask Jeeves? Anybody who's 21 or younger is like, what's that? Exactly. Okay, it's just... Exactly. I thought Google's a weird name, but Jeeves sounds trustworthy. We should ask him, you know, ask Jeeves. It's gonna work. I did a little research. The current market value of Ask Jeeves is $40,762. The current market value of Google is 1.2 trillion with a T dollars. And so, good prediction. By the way, I Googled that. I didn't ask Jeeves it. Nobody does that, right? Nobody does that. And so, great prediction by me. And And having mentioned a minute ago, I love filling out an NCAA bracket. Some of you raised your hand. I love doing that every year. I don't know if you heard it, but a few years ago, a rich guy named Warren Buffett put out a challenge online. He said if anybody could perfectly predict an NCAA bracket, all 63 games, he would give away $1 billion. And I remember thinking like, well, I'm going to do that. You know, I filled out 13 of those things. It said fill out as many as you want. It's going to help me fulfill my dream to retire by 27. I was like, I'm doing this. This is going to really help me out. And I filled out so many, I thought I had pretty good odds, you know? Like, what are the odds of that? It's probably pretty good odds. Anybody know the odds of filling out a perfect NCAA bracket? Maybe you don't know. We actually are going to throw it up on the screen. Here are the odds. That number is 9 quintillion, by the way. Quintillion and some change to 1. These are the odds that you could perfectly predict an NCAA tournament bracket. But I'm here to tell you today, I really think these are about the same odds that you could perfectly predict the path of your own life. You know, the reality is in here today, whether you want to admit it or not, your life is pretty unpredictable. The odds that you're going to marry the same person, be married for the same amount of years, have the same amount of kids, get the same job, live in the same neighborhood, go to the same place in eternity, that you think that's kind of impossible. It's impossible because life's unpredictable. People are unpredictable. Have you noticed? Yeah, people, there's no telling what they're going to do next. This is why you cannot put your whole heart, life, emotion into a person and not in God. You don't know what they're going to do. You couldn't predict that that person would say that behind your back or break up with you or hurt you like that. You didn't see it coming. People are unpredictable. And when I say people, I'm talking about you. You know, like there's some people in here who could probably admit, man, no telling what dumb thing I'm going to do next. You ever gone to bed at night totally shocked at what you did? You're like, I cannot believe I did that. I got a big mouth, so it's happened to me a lot. I cannot believe I said that. I can be pretty unpredictable. But you know the crazy thing about Jesus is that everything that happened on Easter, Jesus predicted it. In fact, the Easter story alone fulfills over 300 Old Testament predictions or prophecies of what Jesus would do and how he would do it. I mean, what are the odds that this guy in the Old Testament named Daniel could predict the exact time that Jesus would be born 500 years before it happened? Well, what are the odds that this guy named Micah predicted the exact way that Jesus would be born to a virgin 700 years before it happened? What are the odds that some king named David could predict the exact way Jesus was going to die 1,000 years before it happened, in a day when that form of death on a cross didn't even exist yet? What are the odds of that? And yet it all came together with Jesus. Nothing that happened on Easter was a surprise to Jesus. He predicted it, and he saw it coming. But you know who didn't see it coming? Thomas. I feel bad for this guy, Thomas, man. He's just trying to, be a good Christian or a good church person, whatever that means. You know, he's just, trying to follow the Lord, and all of a sudden he's gone. His leader, Jesus, is gone. And he thinks to himself, no way. This couldn't happen. God's a good God, and if he's a good God, he wouldn't have allowed this, right? I mean, I couldn't have predicted this. What am I supposed to do now, God? You ever been there? Just trying to follow the Lord, and then the unpredictable happens, and it's, what am I supposed to do now? And I feel bad for Thomas because he has one 10-day stretch where he's doubting the Lord. But because it's documented in the Bible for everybody to see, what is he known as for the rest of eternity? Doubting Thomas. That's pretty tough, you know? But sometimes people will do that to you. Sometimes we could do that to each other in church. Label somebody for one moment of weakness, one season in their life that was tough, and now that follows you everywhere you go. You know, some of us have been trying to run away from a label that we got maybe a long time ago, something that we did, something about who we are. We just can't seem to shake it. And maybe on the inside, that's how you see yourself, or that's how people know you. You're short Sean. You're nerdy Nathan. You're awkward Annie. Or maybe it's something much more real. You're adulterer Adam, or you're a cheater, or you're a pervert, and there's nothing you can do to shake that. That's just who you are. One moment defining the rest. But can I tell you today that Jesus never defines you based on your worst moment of sin, because he already defined you based on his worst moment on the cross, when he shed his blood and died for you to rename you. Jesus does not speak to you in light of where you've been or where you are, but rather where you're going. Who knows where you're going? You don't know where you're going. We just said that. We cannot predict exactly where we're going. We don't always know how the story will end. We don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but who does know? Jesus knows. He does. Your sin did not shock him. Your shortcoming and doubt does not shock him. He actually predicted it, and he planned accordingly. But because he knows your future, he speaks to you with reference to it. It's the enemy. It's the devil. It's people who may be against you. Sometimes it's us in church, unfortunately. We can speak to each other in light of where we've been, but God is the only one who speaks to us in light of where he's taking us. Why? Because he's the only one that knows. He's the only one that knows. He sees the end of the story. He sees the future. Maybe we should listen to what he says. I want to say something that might bring peace to somebody. God does not expect you to predict the path of your own life. He doesn't expect you to know the outcome because there's no way you could know. You don't need to make the path for your own life, but rather he calls us to walk down the path he created for us by faith. Doubting Thomas, please. Jesus doesn't call him Doubting Thomas. We call him that because we can be cruel sometimes. It's not what Jesus says. In fact, I don't even see him as Doubting Thomas anymore. I don't call him that. You know what I call him? I call him Honest Thomas. You know, he's the only one in the story willing to raise his hand and say, is anybody else struggling with this? This is kind of hard, man. How did this happen? I didn't see it coming. He's the only one, as if the rest of them were like full of faith, you know? He says they were hiding for their lives in fear that Jesus wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to save them. Does that seem like someone full of faith to you? No, but Thomas is the only one willing to raise his hand and say, this is hard for me. I'm doubting. How could a good God let something like this happen? It makes no sense. I mean, honestly, what was happening to them was pretty hard. And many of them left their lives, their family, their career to follow this guy. Jesus, their mentor, their big bro, and now he's gone. I mean, he predicted it. But their faith was waning. And here they are in the now what phase. You know, we have a bias. We know the ending of the story, but they didn't. They didn't. They're here in the middle. And how many know it's hard not to doubt in the middle? And some of you know what that's like because that's exactly where you are today. You are in the middle of your situation, your hardship, maybe your life. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. You haven't gotten to chapter 20 yet. You're in chapter 19. People are like, hey, but God's good, brother. And you're like, I know, but you're trying to make sense of this, the thing that all you know right now is your leader or your spouse, your kids, your financial security, your health is gone. And it's like, now what? Now what I'm supposed to do? It's called the middle. It's the hard part. But have you noticed that's where most of life is lived? The middle is the long part. You know, the beginning isn't very hard. That's not very hard. When God speaks to you or when you have a new opportunity, the day of the wedding, that's not hard to have faith in. The first day you get your child, that's exciting. That's not hard. The last day isn't hard. When you get closure, when you have understanding, when the fruit finally came, when the light finally came. What's hard? Every day in the middle, every day in between. It's hard not to doubt what God's doing. Is he here? What's he doing? The middle is where it's easy to doubt. You ever doubted? Some of you are carrying a lot of doubt today. I doubt all the time. I doubted you. I shared a couple months ago that I doubted this church many, many times. Not on day one. No. Day one was great. Day one, when we first set out on this journey, God gave us a calling. He gave us a word. Like, what an honor, you know? Like, it was exciting. People were excited day one. It was like thinking about, man, well, we had 182 people give their life to Jesus in a couple months. That's not hard. Like, when you think about that, that's exciting. It's easy to celebrate that. We have several hundred people coming to each service amongst multiple services. That's not hard to celebrate when you think about that. Like, I don't hear that happening all the time. That's not to say that we're great, but God is moving, and it's exciting to be a part of. That's not hard to think about those things. Right? This is our first Easter, by the way. It's our first Easter in a couple months. Can you imagine where we're going to be in 5 Easters? You know, we underestimate what we can do in 7 months. We overestimate what we can do in 7 months. We underestimate what God can do in 5 years in our life. He can move. I'm excited, man. That's not hard to think about. But then you set out on this journey in the beginning. You set out, and what happens? The unpredictable. Things happen that you didn't see coming. So when you set out and you ask yourself, I had moments like, God, why? Why are there people mad at me? It's weird. There were people that were on board. They were, they wanted to be on the team and serve right next to us, but I don't know where they are. They're nowhere to be found. There were people that wanted to support and, be a part of what we're doing, and now they don't for some reason. Why? And that's not to say anybody's bad or anything, but in your plan, it didn't fit. And so you're like, what's going on, God? And every time that happens, it's a doubt, it's another doubt. But I'll tell you, what I had to learn in my process is this. Faith is not the absence of doubt. It's the means to overcome the doubt. It doesn't mean you never doubt, but it helps you get through it. The triumph of my life through faith was not that I never doubted, but rather it's that I have learned and am still learning how to worship in the middle, how to worship on the way, before it gets easier, before the light at the end of the tunnel comes. How do you worship God then? When you're in the midst of the storm or the hardship. That speaks to your relationship with God more than anything else. in your life? That's a question God wants to answer in our life today. How do you worship then? In the middle, when it's hard. Jesus' cry to this guy is, believe. I know you believe because you see, but really our relationship gets much deeper, much more blessed if you believe before you see it. He doubts. He doesn't receive that encouragement. What's encouraging to me today about that is that I really believe that God can handle our doubt. God can handle it. He's a big boy. He's not turned off by our doubting thoughts that war in our mind. I think that's why a lot of people are turned off to church nowadays. They think they can't come to church and struggle and ask questions. It's like if you ask a question about God and if he exists, I'm going to slap you in the face with a Bible and tell you to leave, you heathen. Like we think that's what's going to happen a lot of the time. That's not what happens here. That's not what happens. Thomas says, please, unless I see the scars, I'm not even going to believe it. And the question is, how does Jesus respond to him? What's he do? Get out of here, heathens. How dare you? You really going to doubt me? Really? Really? After all, you know what? Get out of here. You don't belong in this church, doubting Thomas. No, that's not what Jesus says at all. He says the exact opposite. In fact, he says it like this. In Luke's rendition of the story, Luke chapter 24 and verse 39, Jesus says, why did doubts arise in your hearts? He says, come. You know what? That's fine. Come. Handle me and hold me. Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. A ghost doesn't have scars like I do. A ghost doesn't have flesh and bone as I do. Come. It's okay. I'll walk with you through it. Come check it out. And in doing so, he's telling Thomas, see, I came back for you even when you did not believe. Friends, doubt is real, but can I tell you, you can doubt here. You can doubt here. I'm not so insecure in my belief of God that you doubting him will make me question my belief in him. No, that verdict is already in. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody gets to heaven or to God except through him. But if you're not there yet, if you're struggling with that, that's okay. Take all the time you need. Not trying to create a space to shove you into Jesus, but rather creating a space where you can bump into him and find him, and he can find you on his own. I'm not going to act like these disciples didn't doubt. The people who saw him, by the way, they saw the miracles. They saw him preach. They still doubted. They still doubted. You know, you might be doubting today that God exists, that he's even real. I think many more of us are probably doubting if he's good, or if he has a plan for my life, or his presence is even in my life. We're doubting that. Why? Because life is hard. And every time it gets harder, every time somebody hurts us, every time we hurt someone else or ourselves, it makes us doubt even more this power that we're talking about. And it leaves us saying, where's God? You know, the world is a dark place. Where is God in all this? How could he let this happen? And that is exactly where Thomas finds himself. Discouraged, at a loss for what to do next. He's in pain. I can relate to this guy, Thomas. I can relate to him. But my question today is, what does Jesus do to help him? See, this is where the story gets really good. How does Jesus encourage him? How does he prove to this guy that he is who he says he is, and he did what he said he did? What's interesting to me, again, it's not the miracles or the preaching or the gifting or the crowds. That's not what proves that he's God and that he actually raised from the dead. What it was the scars. That's interesting to me because often what we use to prove to other people that God is for us and with us is our successes. You know, our accomplishments, our really good hair days, our really great posts on Instagram. You know, we're just, God's with me, God's for me. But Jesus here, I think, is trying to show us something really powerful. And that's this, that more than any success in your life can prove that God's with you. It's the scars in your life. The things that tried to eliminate you or tried to take your faith, but they couldn't, you're still here. And by Jesus showing off his scars, it's really encouraging to me because it shows what this family really is. And it shows what church really is. Church is not a place where you roll down your sleeves and act like things in your life aren't there. It's not a place where you come and act like you're better than you really are. Christianity is not cosmetic surgery where we act like things, you know, it just didn't really happen. Let's just eliminate that part of the story. I won't tell it. Cut that out of the video. You know, it didn't happen. That's not what it is. Faith is not a denial of reality. Faith is choosing to walk in a deeper reality than the one that I see. Yeah. I'm not swayed by just what I see. My faith directs my steps, but it doesn't deny or ignore where I've walked, or maybe that life has walked on me. Yeah. Jesus showing his scars is not, this is what he's saying. I'm not trying to act like the cross didn't happen. It did. I'm not trying to act like y'all didn't betray me. You did. I'm not trying to act like the nails didn't hurt when they were pounded into my hands and my feet. It did hurt, but you know what? I'm still here. What tried to take me out could not actually take me out. And they proved that God was with me more than anything else. I don't want to play games today. I'm not going to act like my blessings made me who I am. No, my battles made me who I am. The things that God brought me through. Did it hurt? Was it hard? But ask yourself, are you still here? There's actually a beautiful set of verses in Psalm 48 that David encourages people with. We're going to throw it up on the screen. Psalm 48 in verse 12, it says this, walk about. Somebody say walk about. Walk about. David's saying sometimes you got to walk around your life and see what God has done. Walk around Israel, Zion. Go around her, count her towers. Consider well her ramparts. View her citadels, that you may tell of them to the next generation. And look at this. For this God is our God forever and ever, and he will be our God even to the end. Here's the context of what just happened. They just had a huge battle. You might not know that based on what he said, but like half the city has been torn down. A battle that ravaged their lives, ravaged the city. There's scars everywhere, but even in the midst of that, God inspires David to write this, to remind us, and then that sometimes you got to do a walkabout. You got to walk around your life and count the battles. You know, everybody says count your blessings. Sometimes you got to count your battles because they showed that God was with you more than a blessing ever could. That's where your faith became real. When it was challenging and difficult, did you still follow? Did you still make it out? What made Jesus our Savior? Was it the preaching in the crowds? It was the cross that actually made Jesus our Savior. And the scars that were left proved that God was with him. Why? Because the nails were gone. Yeah. The nails were gone. They weren't there anymore. And this is Jesus showing what once held me can no longer hold me. It can't hold me back anymore. What once gripped me, arrested me, captivated my life, no longer has me anymore. I've been set free. The nails were there, but they're not there anymore. And I'm not going to live the rest of my life like it didn't happen. It did. It did happen, but let me tell you what my Father did through it. He took the nails away. The nails hurt, but they left a scar. But now we see that the scar is simply a reminder that the devil tried, but he lost. Yeah. What seemed like a loss or a win for him on Friday became a loss by Sunday. Jesus won. And the scar is a symbol of that. It's a reminder of that. Man, you talk about pain and hardship and doubt. Exhibit A, Jesus. Jesus went through every pain you've ever been through. That's what the Bible says. He was hungry. He was thirsty. He was tired. He was weak. He lost a loved one who passed away. He cried. He had his loved ones betray him. People he never, you'd never think they would do it. It was them. They did it. It was them. And then he dies the most excruciating death you could ever think of on a cross. And he was innocent. And doubt, you don't think Jesus doubted? I mean, I don't know. There's a verse in Matthew chapter 27 with Jesus on the cross. One of the 7 things he said on the cross is what? My God, why? Why have you forsaken me? And I don't mean to mess with your theology on Easter, but that seems like it could be a doubt to me. I don't know. I'll let you decide. But what that speaks to me is this: doubting is not a sin. It's what you do with the doubt. Because why? Because Jesus, I believe, in that moment could have used that doubt, gotten off the cross. He was still fully God. But what does he do? He shows us something. He says, I'm doubting. It's hard. But what did he do? He kept his arms up. Yeah. Keep your arms up. It's hard, but keep worshiping. Keep following. Keep plugging away. Keep the faith knowing that he's coming and he's going to take the nails out. They put Jesus on that cross, and in that day, it was a symbol of loss and death. It was a big scar. But what, church? Today, people wear the cross around their neck. They tattoo it on their body. They bumper sticker it on their cars. Why? Because what used to be a symbol of loss and death is now a symbol of life and victory. He won. He won. He turned the scar around. It left a scar. It left a scar. But what is the scar? A reminder that he won. The nails are gone. The nails are gone. He's not ashamed of it. The nails are gone. That's what Jesus does on Easter. He takes the nails away. The sting and the pain of hurt, hardship, doubt. He takes the sting away. That's what he does on Easter, right? The nails are gone on Easter. The nails in Jesus' hands were gone to prove that through him, what once held you can no longer hold you. You're set free. And some of you today, you just might be in the middle. You say, man, I'll take a scar, but right now it feels like a wound. It's still open. It hurts. You're not in chapter 20, you're in chapter 19. And you're like, hey, in the meantime, what am I supposed to do? Well, what's Jesus' encouragement? The last verse we read, John chapter 20, verse 29, he looks at Thomas and he says, Thomas, you see, so you believe. But blessed are those who believe before they see anything. And I used to think that was an indictment on Thomas. I don't think it's that. I think it's an invitation to us. You might be in the middle. Why wait till it gets better to worship God? You don't need to. Today you can lift your hand and say, that's me. I'm not going to wait till I get the light. I'm not going to wait till it figures itself out. I'm going to believe you today. I don't want to wait. You're my encouragement to push on through. Faith is believing in things I cannot see. It's not a denial of reality. No, it's choosing to follow a deeper reality than just this. And so can you believe today? Can you follow today? Why don't we go ahead and pray? Would you bow your heads?